The Media Project. Breaking Housing Matters is a national housing initiative building housing profitably. It is a first-of-its-kind initiative currently being piloted in Rutland City, Vermont, USA. BHM brings multiple key stakeholders from the housing development ecosystem together to solve the dual issues of affordability and profitability. Participate in an all-ships-rise approach designed by a multiplicity of internationally recognized experts in development, economics, housing, and governance. Donate, start a petition for your community, or learn more at breakinghousingmatters.org. Press and program inquiries, please contact our Vermont Director, Scott Graves, at scott@breakinghousingmatters.org.
My guest today is Ilana Prus, founder of Recast City, LLC, which she's led for 10 years. Her commitment is to apply her expertise in smart growth, community reinvestment, real estate analysis, and stakeholder engagement to create more opportunity for more people in more places, and to create strong, inclusive, and resilient economies. Her core beliefs navigate this approach. I believe in the power of local business. I believe in greater opportunity for more people, from big city to rural town. I believe in creating more places we love everywhere. I believe we create strong, resilient local economies by investing in all of these outcomes. And I believe that small-scale manufacturing businesses and the real estate they occupy gets us these outcomes. Ilana is the author of 2021's Recast Your City, How to Save Your Downtown with Small-Scale Manufacturing. And so it is that today's subject is on how we build stronger communities through small-scale manufacturing. Ilana, thanks for joining us.
My pleasure to be here today. Thanks for inviting me.
So talk to us, why is small-scale manufacturing a viable option? And maybe give a profile of what that modern option, in fact, looks like.
So small-scale manufacturing is an exciting opportunity for communities. When we talk about small-scale manufacturing, I'm talking about any business that makes a tangible product that you can replicate or package. One of my shorthands for it is hot sauce, handbags, or hardware, right? It's everything from the artisans at your pop-up market to advanced manufacturing, making a widget for some big supply chain user.
Big spectrum.
Huge spectrum, right? It's your breweries, it's your jewelry makers, it's the person making the super, super detailed spec piece for NASA ships or whatever those things are. It's really exciting because it is this product making world. And what it does for our communities, it does a lot of different things, but one of the things it does for our communities is it brings energy to a neighborhood level or to a downtown, because these businesses, especially the ones that are consumer facing, are amazing in storefronts. They bring energy to storefronts. They're selling online as well as in person, so they're not dependent on foot traffic, but they draw it in. They're open to any person who has a culture or a history of making something. College and advanced degrees are not required. We know entrepreneurship is a wide open field for anybody. And it helps people build wealth in communities where wealth building has really been historically not only a challenge, but people have been excluded from those opportunities. And so we take all of that on top of what we're seeing today, post-pandemic, where we have retail vacancies all over the country at astronomical numbers, let alone the office vacancies.
Yeah.
We have this amazing part of our economy that we can grow.
And so why would the development of small scale manufacturing work in a place that's as rural, say, as where I am right now in Vermont, right, versus major metros? Because we're not talking about something that strictly works in major metros, or frankly, might not necessarily even work in a major metro, right? It's in places, regardless of their size, I take it, that have sort of a, a penchant for a priority on local, right? That can really help a brand, can it?
Well, it definitely can help, but it's not even required. So we've worked with communities from downtown Atlanta to a small town of 600 people in Colorado
Wow.
and San Luis. And it works because we have community members who are making things in every community and in every neighborhood. We're doing work in neighborhoods in the south side of Chicago. We've done work in Louisiana. We're doing work in rural Washington State. We've done work. New York City just changed their zoning to allow more of this in their storefronts. It's a business sector that has been long ignored. And I think it's because in the 80s and 90s and early 2000s, manufacturing, big scale manufacturing, was really demonized in this country. Students in the country were taught, oh, you can do better than that. And we did a lot of things very purposefully to destroy unions. And it was looked down upon as a field, as opposed to in the 60s and 70s and before that, where the opportunity to work in manufacturing was a good paying job, and a long-term commitment between a business and a person. And what has happened really over the last 10 years, 10, 15 years, is that we saw the growth of the maker movement. The cool factor of making things grew again, and the growth of the internet and online sales happened at the same time. And so we have this perfect storm in a good way of people who can make stuff, can access this national and international market to literally bring dollars into their community, which is just a completely different game than anything we saw before.
Yeah. And, I'm putting my economic development hat on for a minute and saying, well, by the definition and the description you've given us, to be able to take people who are making stuff at an artisanal level, let's say, right? They're a very small business by federal definition at home. So if I want to help seed this, if I want to help facilitate more of this kind of thing in my town, right, I might come up with the physical space and also the other types of resources necessary. One, for people that are going from home-based business to, let's try for, because you're talking about the property development at the same time, right? And the downtown development, get them out of the house and into a place that's in the center of town where they are exposed to a larger marketplace, digital, non-digital, or otherwise. And by the same token, places like prototyping, you mentioned maker spaces, or at least describe them, right? These type of physical environments coupled with programming that actually offer people wherever you meet them where they're at, and then help them expand their marketplace, if in fact that's what they want to do.
Right. I mean, you having a background in the incubators and accelerator, it's entrepreneurship. It's just a different part of entrepreneurship, because you have supply chain problems, you have distribution problems. When you're doing software, you face different challenges, but they need the same kind of support. And one of the things that I love talking to people about is to think about all of these lessons that we've learned through the tech sector, right? We've spent so much money and time on figuring out how to make the tech sector explode. And sometimes it works. Well, we can take those lessons and apply them to the product sector. They need the same 4 key things. They need space to do their work. Mm-hmm. They need training and support and mentorship to grow. They need capital, investment, and loans. And they need PR. We need to tell their story so other people see that this is an option for themselves as well.
You probably come across a lot of, you just mentioned the idea of, communities wanting to bring tech or tech enabled. I've been a part of a lot of conversations that go along the lines of, well, we want to bring some tech here to town. What do you mean by that? Tech. And I look and you're in let's say you're in an environment where you've got, maybe 25,000 people living there. It's a livable, desirable place. There's a lot of good bones structurally or otherwise, community wise. They've got a long tradition. They've got oral traditions of making things that go back 150 or more years.
Right.
It's not that, and I'm not saying, hey, don't do tech and tech enabled. I'm just saying, like, they don't have any meat on the bone as far as what they mean by tech. And at the same time, they're sitting upon there's probably thousands of people there, right, with this oral history of how to make things, right?
Right.
Transferable skills, right? So this probably comes up a lot for you.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we know across the country, we have some communities that are doing the modern version of chasing the smokestacks, right? They want to recruit big business to solve all their woes. Or they're a tourist town that's a complete boom and bust cycle that's super seasonal, right?
Yeah.
Where people struggle to be able to live in that community if they work there because the cost is so expensive there because of this weird boom bust cycle.
And no professional class wages, you know?
And nothing, right? And then we have folks like what you're talking about with tech, where I think it's a little bit less now than it was maybe 10 years ago. But it was, oh my God, how are we investing in our own accelerator? How are we going to create our own unicorn? When in reality, the way economic development is sustainable and resilient and meaningful, which I feel like we never actually talk about in economic development, is when we're looking at what are the skills in our community, just like you were talking about. What is the culture of this place, the history of this place? What are the existing skills of the people in our community? And how do we build on that so that we're building these deep roots within the community that we can keep building on, as opposed to throwing recruitment money at somebody who's going to be there for 7 years with their 200 jobs, but that are going to disappear in 7 years. This boom and bust cycle that we have to break out of. And we have to do that by really growing from the people within our community, which is just a completely different way of doing it than what historically has been taught in economic development.
Yeah. And and I think we've got enough substantive history of what happens when you create a one-trick pony, right? Like, I don't think you want to be the traditional mill town as far as we knew it in the 19th century anymore, early 20th century, one industry, one vertical, that kind of thing. It's just not, it's not resilient. And today it's going to last half as long as it used to for the cycle, right? I mean,
whatever it is. Yeah.
What are some examples in communities that you've worked in that you can offer listeners of, where this worked, or maybe even some challenges to get there too,
So it looks different in each community. One of the things that we do when we work with communities is help them understand what's special and interesting about them. Who are their people? What are they already making? What are they already doing? Because when we build on where the energy is already moving, we're going to get there that much faster. So in each community, we're really helping them understand that. And then what comes out the other side is going to be unique to that community. So in Columbia, Missouri, they recognize the need to create a commercial shared kitchen. There were people having food product businesses bursting out of the seams at home, and they needed a place to be able to grow their kitchen. They created one within 6 months of working with us. Actually, it was a year because the pandemic slowed them down. Yeah. They're now in their second space. It's already at capacity. It's an amazing community asset. We worked with Bellflower, California. They saw that with a new commuter rail coming into downtown, the cost of space in their town, in the center of downtown, was going up and was already not affordable for small scale manufacturing. But they wanted to make sure that space for local businesses was going to be retained. So they created a grant program that would help the business afford the lease rate in the downtown. Other folks have created low-cost storefront space that's shared. People have invested in all sorts of different programming specifically for small-scale manufacturing businesses to learn how to scale, and it really depends on the community. The challenge, and I'll flip it on its head, because we've worked with over 60 different communities over our 10 years, is leadership. It really takes leadership, and it takes, what's the right way to say it? It takes people putting down the roots of consistency of execution. I don't know a better way to say it. So when we have staff turnover, or when an elected official comes in and out, and we don't have somebody who's there for the long term taking care of it, it goes with the winds of change. It doesn't necessarily see follow through. In communities where it's being led by a quasi-governmental entity or a nonprofit, we often see a longer term success. Knoxville is a great example of that. They have the Knoxville Entrepreneur Center. Well, we worked with them almost way at the beginning. It was 8-9 years ago. But it's this separate organization that's been charged with creating entrepreneurship opportunities in the city that was originally focused on tech businesses, and then worked with us and the Urban Institute in Knoxville to really grow what they call the Maker City. They actually have the URL, the Maker City,
Nice.
and have tons of programming and support for that business sector now.
Yeah, okay. So that makes sense that, sometimes even working with a governmental administration that's there for a long period of time, priorities change, especially it was bad before the pandemic. I've noticed in the work I'm trying to do as a private person trying to buy properties, as an example, like priorities change weekly in some cases, right? Because people's, resources are having to change around very quickly. So, having that sort of leadership, I'm going to guess too that for a certain amount of this, it's a cultural thing. Like the community itself has to be convinced that it can do things again, especially when you're getting into, we're going to make things again, right? For 18 years, I lived in a central Massachusetts city that was known for 150 plus years as a furniture making center. And only in the last maybe 17 years, deindustrialized from that. There were still 5,000 people, almost 5,000 people working in that trade when we first came to town. Talk to us a little bit about what happens in a community. For us there for many years, we had to overcome this idea that we could make something again. We had to overcome the idea that but it's not going to be furniture anymore. Well, right. Because the economy has proven that we're not going to do that again, but we can still make stuff. Right. And it took a lot. Most of the challenge, if you will, was a cultural one to convince everybody that this was a worthwhile thing and that we could do it as a community. Yeah. I'm talking about leadership and just citizens.
Yeah. I think there's a psychology of place that we rarely talk about. These communities where the bottom really fell out anywhere from 15 to 50 years ago because the big industry left.
Right.
I think there's a lot of challenges around, does anybody believe in that place anymore? Or are they just getting through? And I've worked in more than one community where I've said to people, you have to find the believers. Like that's your first job, is finding the believers. You might be able to bring everybody else along, but you're going to make something happen with the believers. And that's why we start by finding the small scale manufacturing businesses. Somebody who's even doing it part-time is going to know what works and what doesn't work and what they need to be able to continue to grow, more so than any other person we're going to talk to. And so we really encourage folks to de-risk investments by going directly into user research with these business owners.
Imagine a vibrant region that embraces innovative technology and systems, allowing individuals and businesses to grow and thrive within the natural and cultural lifestyle of Vermont. Imagine the Black River Innovation Campus. Our community includes business and technology programming, co-working and technology tools, and other exciting experiences that are quickly creating an outsized impact to our little corner of northern New England here in Springfield, Vermont. PC Mag rates Springfield, Vermont number 8 for the best work-from-home cities in the U.S. Join us in Vermont. Begin your journey at bricvt.org.
Yeah, and that's another thing too, right? Like let's support people doing the things that they want to do. It really has to be a bottom up approach, particularly from the standpoint of what are we going to make? And speaking of that too, so the vision, the imagination runs wild a bit, and I think of a future where you've got relatively artisanal level small stalls, in a downtown of various people making things, right? Interspersed with your other types of retail or service or restaurants, what have you. Then you've got maybe makerspace and or prototyping going on, right? For maybe some type of, they could be relatively innovative materials. It could be construction. It could be processes in construction or what have you, right? You might have a few companies you've attracted to your community or that were started there and stayed because of all of this activity, right? Because there are other people who can then come in and work on their highly innovative product who have been manufacturing some slightly more mundane object or product with somebody else for a long period of time. But how do you make all of that ecosystem that I just described happen? Like this is like and I don't mean this in a bad way, but it's like it's a project for a generation, like anything else worth doing. It sounds like.
Yeah, but you could say that about the tech sector too. And I mean, so much has happened in the last 20 years. It's unfathomable.
True.
Right. I do think that, but it doesn't have to be perfect, right? We don't need all of the pieces. I'm working on a new scorecard that is not live yet. That's 10 different elements that if you have all 10 elements, you're going to have a golden small scale manufacturing and like real estate space that's going to be beautiful. But you probably could be great if you had 3 of them, right? And so the question I always ask is, what are the pieces of the 100 different things we could do? Which ones are most essential to the people in your community fighting to make this happen right now? Let's get those things out the fastest. Let's make those wins happen in the short term, because if we can energize those believers, if we can energize those entrepreneurs and we can showcase their energy, we're going to draw more people to that sector. We're going to draw more support for that sector, and that'll keep our engine going out of doing all of these different pieces.
And you've made reference to the tech sector several times. My guess is a tech and tech-enabled companies are going to want to be in your town more, right?
Absolutely.
You're going to be able to retain young people that are going to work for those teams if you have this other stuff going. I can see how they're symbiotic. Like,
absolutely.
You can't have people buying my $40 mug that I'm making in my pottery shop unless I have a critical mass of people, enough of those people, unless I have a critical mass of people with 2 things, time and money in my community. I need people with professional class wages, and they need to have enough time to come to my store or my activity, right? Especially if I'm activity based. But by the same token, why do people stay in a neighborhood? They stay because you've got great restaurants, great nightlife, great artists working. There's all different kinds of other types of business, everything in between. It's the variety that keeps people stimulated to stay there, isn't it?
It is. It's the variety, but it's also the connection, right? I started, my background's in city planning, right? So I drill down to like zoning changes, economic development strategy. But the thing I've realized the most over the years is that people stay because they feel connected. They feel some personal connection to that place. And yes, we get that by having storefronts that are filled. We get that by having programming and events, like all of those things come together. But I do think that we have to think about how we're connecting with people personally. And that's why we go and talk to these business owners one-on-one to really understand their needs. But it's also where I think we forget, like you were talking about with the recruitment of tech or whatever, businesses only want to move to great places at this point. So by investing in creating a great place filled with cool storefronts, and by taking care of our entrepreneurs, I think that's in fact the best way to recruit other business owners in the future, is because we've taken care of that and we've created that connected place that people want to be in.
Yeah, I like your approach to all of this too, because what you're essentially trying to do is create it's a place that's worthwhile, and people will want to stay. And if anyone else is going to come there, then let them, because they're attracted to it. But why, since you have a background in city planning, why do communities spend so much time trying to attract some big business or any size business from somewhere else? Focus on building the community you've always wanted to live in, right?
Yeah.
And the rest.
I completely agree. And, I put that in the same category as the destruction that we created with urban renewal from the city planning point. We destroyed communities through urban renewal. I think this whole thinking, this an entire theory of economic development is the same as trickle down economics, which didn't work, right? The idea is if we bring in a big business, they're going to spend money, their people are going to spend money, all of those dollars are going to circulate in our community, and then everybody else is going to benefit like third, fourth, fifth hand. When in reality, they predominantly bring other people in from outside the community. Their dollars are mostly leaving the community and they're not circulating within the community, as opposed to investing directly into our community members,
right,
and their business growth and their local hiring from within their neighborhoods that circulate. But I think it's like when we bring in a large business, like 20% of the dollars circulate. And when we invest in a local business, 80% of the dollars circulate. I might have my numbers wrong, but it's something like that. And it's just a no-brainer to me. But I think that the glam of a ribbon cutting and the big game hunting of it feels very cool to people, and so they keep pursuing it.
Right. But like any drug that's addictive, the hangover is far worse. You regret it eventually.
Absolutely.
You know,
Absolutely.
I noticed looking at, because I think earlier you made reference, you've worked in over 60 communities in the last decade, which is incredible, by the way. Just that's wonderful. And I noticed
It's
one.
so fun.
I
Yeah.
saw the seal for the city, and I said, oh, because for 9 years, while I was in school, and then for many years afterwards, had the pleasure of living in one of the country's great industrial cities. I'm, of course, ladies and gentlemen, talking about the city of Lowell, Massachusetts.
I love Lowell.
I love Lowell too. I just, what was the experience like there? I'm going to guess, since it was within the last decade, I mean, the city was, in the last 30 years, has been a lot different than it was the prior, 30 years. It kind of had to get sick and tired of being sick and tired. I mean, collectively as a people, before things started to dramatically change. To your point, believers,
Yeah.
right? Like people they became believers, however reluctantly. But once that started to happen, the momentum was real. Maybe you can talk a little bit about that project.
So we've actually worked with Lowell twice. We worked with the previous administration, right? This is about the change in leadership 7, 8 years ago, maybe 9 years ago. And we were focusing on a neighborhood in Lowell called the Acre that is predominantly an immigrant neighborhood, Cambodian and Hispanic.
Lived in the Acre for 8 years. I love that neighborhood.
Unbelievable food, and the people are just amazing. And the question was, how do we help grow entrepreneurship opportunities and wealth building opportunities with immigrant populations, which was really an amazing set of discussions and interviews with people to understand what we could do, especially because the Acre, for anybody who has a town with interesting neighborhoods right next to downtown, the Acre neighborhood abuts downtown, and downtown was starting to be successful and grow. And so one of my concerns always is, how do you actually help a neighborhood retain its identity and space for its own community?
Which really means retain the people there now and don't gentrify those people out of their own houses. Don't
displace them out of their homes or their stores. And they've amazing stores. So that was really interesting. And now we have Lowell in our Recast Leaders program, which is our national cohort program, looking at downtown and a lot of the vacancies that they have downtown. And for anybody who hasn't been in Lowell before, there's these beautiful mill buildings, multi-story old industrial buildings, many of which have been turned into amazing loft apartments. Those are drool-worthy spaces to me. And some of them haven't yet. And some of them are this funky mashup of different uses. And so Lowell's just super fun because folks who get to Recast Leaders who apply for our cohort program really get that small scale manufacturing is part of the answer. They have no idea how to get there usually, but they know that it's part of the answer. And so Lowell's a place that I think that, like you said, it hit the bottom, and it has enough new blood in its leadership now that people get that something else is possible. And I do think that it does take new blood to see what's exciting and what's amazing about a place. Often people who did not go through that rock bottom era.
They also spent a lot of time beginning in the late 70s, really, and it wasn't always perfect, but from an official standpoint, celebrating the diversity of the city itself and its immigrant past and its industrial and the whole story. They didn't really, and it took a long time. It took more than 40 years for them to really get around and the story, how they tell it. Because for those that don't know, there's a whole section of the city that's just a series of museums to its industrial past. One of the first planned industrial cities in the country, but doing that story has changed over time. There were things that people felt very sensitive and they couldn't talk about in the 70s and 80s that now are part of that narrative about immigrants and people not getting along a lot, but in the end coming together as a city, and they celebrate everybody there. People are proud to be from wherever their families originally came from and can celebrate that as a space for them to celebrate that publicly. And I think a lot of the success of the city is because of that, because people feel like they have a voice in a variety of different ways.
No, I mean, it's fascinating to me to look at our history. There's a great book that I just read called Making It in America that's all about our manufacturing history. And it somehow the author Rachel Slade combines, the CIA and romance and manufacturing. It's a great fast read
That
nonfiction.
sounds like a cool book.
It is a cool book. I ate it up. But one of the things she points out is that our country really purposefully tore manufacturing apart.
Yeah.
Right? NAFTA destroyed it. And the private equity investments continue to destroy it. And it's fascinating to me to think about its context in our history and to think about, I don't work with folks that are 2,000 person manufacturing anymore. I work with the folks who are 1 person to 50, which to everybody else is called micro enterprises. And if you can get local economic development to pay attention to folks under 5 employees to no employees to single person business, it's a win to me. But it's sort of shocking every time I think about it that they're working into headwinds that we have been building for 50 years.
Yep. And yet here they are by the thousands doing this. I mean,
exactly.
I feel like for the next there will be another generation of manufacturing going on because of these people. Do you find too in a lot of these communities that there is actually way more manufacturing going on still than people ever think? Because that's what I seem to see is people, we don't do that here anymore. And there'll be like 30 businesses doing it. Some of these businesses are super resilient, right? Because they found the niche. That marketplace isn't going anywhere and they're able to make a go of it.
Oh, absolutely. And one of the fun things I get to do when I go on site with folks is get to see them, right? I was in a warehouse. I can't even remember what city I was in. I can picture the space I was in. People were making hand silk screened custom wallpaper.
Interesting.
For the New York City market, super high end. And just these huge long tables where they would go over with 7 different colors, right? One at a time to screen print these unbelievable designs that were custom ordered. Or in Baltimore, Maryland has hundreds and hundreds of these small product businesses hidden all over the place in the city, sometimes in buildings that you don't think anybody's in. And there's anywhere from a dozen to 100 of those businesses in that building. Baltimore's doing a good job getting behind this sector, but it's amazing to see where everyone's sort of squirreled away in the city.
Yeah. I have to say the theme overall I'm feeling from our conversation today is hope and can do. Like this is our new reality. It's I think it's like, I think you aptly described it, which is, we put down manufacturing culturally, not just pragmatically, for at least a whole generation. My generation was told, this is a dead end. Don't do this. And now
mine too.
We know of jobs right now that have been open for 3 years, 4 years, pay more than $80,000 a year, and they simply cannot expand the businesses because they can't get people to work in manufacturing. They simply can't find anybody to come in. They'll train you. People just don't want to do it. Do you think that that's the biggest challenge right now for most kinds of manufacturing?
I think that that's one of the challenges. I think as people scale, we're finding more folks, once you get past 10 or 20 employees, you really have, people are going it alone, right? They have to create their own training program. We don't have workforce training programs in most places that are teaching people these skills. The community college in Columbia, Missouri is a phenomenal partner. They actually partnered with the Improvement District to go after Economic Development Administration funding for a makerspace that would be for the school, because they already were teaching people how to fix those tools, but they didn't get to use the tools. So now it's also open to the public. But in High Point, North Carolina, the industry created a partnership with the community college to create a furniture upholstery training program because all of them needed that skill. And so I think we have to see more partnerships coming together. There are manufacturing extension partnerships in every state. I hope they are good partners to people, but we need them to be working with folks who have 10 employees to get to 50 or 100 or 200 employees.
Or more importantly, to do, to your point, what to do when you hit that ceiling and, are there smarter ways to grow, right? How do I make that happen? And I don't start giving contracts back because I can't get them done, right? Or that kind of thing.
Right. And part of the challenge is that so many of these business owners are going it alone. So we know from lots of research that when business owners have strong mentors, they're twice as likely to succeed. And if they have strong partnerships with other business owners, they're twice as likely to succeed. And what we see in small scale manufacturing as businesses grow is they have no idea where to find those mentors. Going back to tech for a second, we have created accelerators and incubators with these very formal processes, not only of training, but of mentorship and investment. And one of the things I work with communities to understand is that we need to create that same infrastructure, that same ecosystem of support for small scale manufacturing. They need the mentors, they need the scaling support, and they need the investment.
Ilana Prus is the author of
Recast Your City, How to Save Your Downtown with Small Scale Manufacturing.
Thank you for joining us, Ilana. It has been an absolute pleasure having you on the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
SMG's Are We Here Yet podcast is a production of M the Media Project and SM Graves Associates. Learn more at smgravesassociates.com. And now in the Jazz Room, this is part 2 of Arturo O'Farrell's interview, where he expands his thoughts to discuss the still small voice that we as a people share, and the nonprofit organization he formed to benefit out-of-work performers of all genres during the COVID-19 quarantine. And now, enjoy the show.
Hello, my name is Arturo O'Farrell, and I'm inviting you to join me in the Jazz Room with our wonderful hostess, Joan Watson-Jones.
Welcome to the Jazz Room. I'm your host, Joan Watson-Jones. Thanks for stopping by. Come in, relax while we enjoy great jazz. Each show, we present the music of independent jazz artists, as well as those we've grown to love through the years. And yes, of course, the legends. We open this part 2 of our interview with Arturo O'Farrell with Jazz Twins, from his Grammy-winning album, 4 Questions. We talk about the still small voice that we all share and his nonprofit organization to benefit performing artists of all genres. Enjoy. taking this program, the way I do the program is we take a little break and we listen to another piece of music.
Okay.
And one of the things that I saw on your project was a still small voice. And before we listen to that, could you tell us about it?
Well, there's a biblical story that the still small voice of conscience that happens inside each and every one of us. And I wanted to make it ecumenical because I realized not everybody believes the same thing I do. So I set the scripture quote. I set it into. I took it from four, even though it says the same thing. I took it from four or five different theologies, and put that still small voice. And it's the still small voice that's inside of all of us that tells us right from wrong. And sometimes we listen, and sometimes we don't. But I think the voice of clarity speaks to every one of us, and all we can do is pray that we listen.
That's true. That's true. That's probably why I just gravitated with your music, because I just so much, I get it. I know what you're trying to say.
Thank you. That means the world to me.
And how do you see music playing a role in advocating for social change and standing up for human rights?
Oh, my God. We are in so much trouble. It is hard for me to keep from weeping at the state of humanity. It has nothing to do with whether you're a Democrat, a Republican, a liberal. It doesn't matter what you are. We are in so much danger. The hatred in the world today and it's been exacerbated by the virus. There's so much anger, so much pent-up hostility. I was driving here. This is a true story. I was driving here yesterday, and I was in the passing lane going very fast, in the rain, in the storm, in the hurricane, whatever it was, and there was a guy behind me who came up to me at like 70, 80 miles an hour and started honking. And I couldn't because the lane next to us was occupied. And so, wait, it doesn't end there. This guy, I still can't believe that this guy in the hurricane or whatever it was, we finally got a clearing. He pulled around me, pulled in front of me, and broke. He put on his brakes. And I had to screech up to a halt, and he just waited. Meanwhile, cars are whizzing by, and it's hurricaning, and I mean, we could have both died. And his pent-up anger, and I wasn't stopping his progress, but I find it unbelievably violent today. I find people unbelievably violent. The anger and the pent-up energy of being cooped up for so long, but a lot of it is risen in political overtones. And so I find that there's a lot of hatred, and it's scary. But I also say this: wherever there is much darkness, there is much light. And if you have a conscience, if you have a heart, if you have a soul, you must stand up for what is correct. And don't be afraid. And so that's what this piece is really all about. A still small voice is about saying something in us is always goading us into good. Will we listen? Will we pay heed? I mean, because that to me is what that whole story is about. That you listen carefully. Everyone has this. I don't care what religion, what denomination, what politics you bear. Every one of us has a conscience inside. We know deeply. We know how to do. Even who has a conscience. Mm-hmm. Maybe. maybe.
The Vermont Technology Alliance. The VTTA is the only statewide organization focused on Vermont's tech business sector and entrepreneurs. Our business members are Fortune 500 companies, startup founders, small business owners, and soloists. We provide advocacy, recruiting of tech talent, events, and other networking opportunities. We are the heart of the tech ecosystem in Vermont. Become a member now at vtta.org. The Vermont Technology Alliance. Tech thrives here.
Here is A Still Small Voice 3, Cacophonous. You're in the Jazz Room. I'm your host, Joan Watson Jones. We continue with our interview with pianist-composer Arturo O'Farrell.
Oh, wonderful. Oh, wonderful. We're doing so well. Now, this album, Four Questions, is the first one where you've done all your own compositions.
Yeah.
How did that, I know, we've talked about how you started, but...
I fight a lot for others, and I fight a lot. And when I say that, I mean I fight a fight for a lot of people separate Latin from jazz, and they don't realize that both Latin and jazz are Africa. And they don't realize that Africa was in New Orleans and in Puerto Rico, and Africa came and visited, and the cataclysm known as the slave trade took place throughout the Americas. And so the elements that end up being called jazz are really Afro-Caribbean, Afro-Latin American. They're all part of the same interweaving, and it's incredible thing, and it's a testament to the people that ended up here, the enslaved, beautiful souls that ended up here, that they managed to turn a horrible thing into incredible love and life and joy and affirmation. I mean, it's just, to me, it's truly amazing. And so, sorry, my phone is going. I have a conga phone. Let me turn it off. Oh dear me. Anyway, so the piece is really, it's an affirmation. It's an affirmation, is Still Small Voice is an affirmation of all the things that we hope for, that there is good, that if you listen to the voice deep inside of you, you will understand freedom, even if you're enslaved, and you will contribute music to the world. And that's where jazz comes from. That's where son jarocho comes from. That's where the great music of salsa, all that music comes from the same roots, and they are African. Let's get real.
Yeah. Now tell us, when we opened, we were talking about helping musicians who have suffered through COVID. So can you tell people more about the Afro-Latino Alliance Emergency Artist Fund?
We have an Afro-Latin Jazz Alliance Emergency Fund that we've maintained for many months during the COVID, because what happened is as soon as COVID hit, I was gainfully employed March 10th of 2020. March 12th, I started seeing gigs cancel. March 13th, they were gone. And I'm lucky because I have a beautiful teaching position at UCLA. So, I'm not going to go into it, but I saw almost all of my friends suffer unbelievable hardship. And so literally a month or so into the pandemic, I created something called the Afro-Latin Jazz Line Artists Emergency Artists Fund. And we raised through our stream over $110,000 to give in grants. We don't ask questions. All we asked, and we didn't discriminate. It wasn't just musicians. We gave grants to performers of all sorts, dancers. In fact, one of my proudest moments is when a comedian called us up, because I love comedy. I'm a big fan of stand-up comedy. I think stand-up comedy is so beautiful. And a stand-up comedian asked us for a grant, and I couldn't believe that I was in a position to help a stand-up comedian who, by the way, stand-up comedians have blessed my life. They have blessed my soul for all my entire life. And so it was I feel like it was a selfish act creating the Emergency Artist Fund, because I got so much out of giving to people that I love. And so, wow. I pray that when you're in a position to help somebody, you do, that everyone does. Look around you. There are people who need you, even if you think you have nothing. And so, that's the truth. That's what that Emergency Artist Fund was all about. We still have it. We still stream. We started a weekly stream, Virtual Birdland, and we're still raising money to give in grants to people.
What's the best way for people to find out about this fund if they want to donate?
They could look at afrolatinjazz.org, and it'll tell you all about it. And by the way, it'll also list all of the different virtual birdlands that we've done. We've had some incredible guests. We had Donla Harrison a couple of weeks ago. We've featured the music of Carla Bley. We've had incredible guests, and the stream has been one of the bright spots in a horrific year. Horrific political year, horrific economic year, horrific in every way, shape, or form. This could not have been a more difficult year. But you know what? As good people do, we rally around to each other's side, and we stand in the gap.
Yes.
That's what good people do.
Yes.
They don't fight, they don't divide. They stand in the gap for one another.
Okay, very quickly. I know you're a teacher. You bring in students, they want to learn jazz, they want to do music. What's the one thing you try and get across to your students?
That's a really good question. I'll tell you what it is. I try and get them to understand that it's not knowing, but being curious. It's not achieving, but continuing to learn. That no one person can know everything about anything. In fact, we can really barely know anything about anything. And so when you meet teachers who excel in professing their knowledge, they're lying. But when you meet teachers who exhort you to examine everything they say, like I tell my students, I say, don't believe a word I say. Find out for yourselves. Discover for yourselves. I'm just going to tell you what I see. That might not be right. And that's the most beautiful thing about teaching is seeing that we're all students, every one of us.
And we're students for a lifetime.
Oh yeah.
Yes,
And you know what? I'm thrilled because the older I get, the less I know.
I feel the same way. I feel the same way. Well, Arturo, thank you so much for being here in the Jazz Room. A privilege for us too. And I'm excited to put this show together and infuse your music in between your words.
You're so sweet. You're so kind.
And what have you. So thank you so much.
Thank you, my love. You are the best.
Finally, here is A Still Small Voice 4, featuring the Still Small Voice Singers, from the album Four Questions. This ends our interview with Arturo O'Farrell. Learn more about him and the album Four Questions at www.arturoofarrell.com. We've come to the end of another show. Thank you for spending time here with us in the Jazz Room. We love hearing from you. You can now find the Jazz Room on Twitter at Ms. Jazz Kitty, and you may email me or chat with me on the Jazz Room page of my website, JoanWatsonJones.com. Until next time, you've been in the Jazz Room. I'm your host, Joan Watson Jones.
The Jazz Room is distributed by M the Media Project and SM Graves Associates. Learn more at smgravesassociates.com.